Radical Shiite clerics operating on American soil are preaching that the war with Iran isn't just a geopolitical conflict. It's the prophetic showdown that will usher in the arrival of the Mahdi, their Messiah, who will battle the Antichrist in a final apocalyptic war. And in this prophecy, President Donald Trump is the Antichrist. A Fox News digital investigation reveals mosques, schools, and community organizations across the United States are spreading Iranian regime propaganda, framing the conflict with America as end-times theology. They're teaching children to be soldiers for the Mahdi. They're telling congregations that Iran has been waiting 47 years for the mother of all battles, with America. They're celebrating the deaths of terrorist leaders as martyrs preparing the way for the Messiah. This isn't happening in Tehran. This is happening in Virginia, Michigan, and Texas, on American soil, in institutions supported by a New York-based nonprofit with $58 million in assets. At a Shiite mosque in Manassas, Virginia, an imam closed Friday prayer with a plea, "May Allah destroy all the non-believers before the arrival of Imam Mahdi." On a table of honor in the mosque's main prayer hall sat framed photos of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, embracing Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar and Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, both killed by Israel for orchestrating terrorist attacks. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned about this theological dynamic in early February. Iran ultimately is governed by radical Shiite clerics who make policy decisions on the basis of pure theology. When you understand what this apocalyptic ideology actually teaches, how deeply it's embedded in Iranian-backed institutions on American soil, and what it means that clerics are preaching this as Iran's leadership has just been killed and replaced, you'll realize we're not just fighting a regime, we're fighting an ideology that views this conflict as the fulfillment of prophecy. Let me walk you through what this theology actually is, where it's being preached in America, and why it matters that these clerics see the current war as the beginning of the end times. The Mahdi is a central figure in Shiite Islamic eschatology, or end times theology. According to this belief, the Mahdi is a messianic figure who disappeared in the 9th century and will return at the end of time to battle evil and establish justice. In Shiite prophecy, the Mahdi will emerge to fight the Dajjal, the Islamic equivalent of the Antichrist. This final battle will be an apocalyptic showdown between good and evil, ultimately resulting in the Mahdi conquering the world and establishing divine rule. For many hardline Shiite ideologues, including those supporting the Iranian regime, this isn't metaphorical. This is literal prophecy that they believe is unfolding right now. And in their interpretation, President Trump is the Dajjal, the Antichrist figure who must be defeated. Iran's leaders don't just use this theology for propaganda, they genuinely believe it guides their actions. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iran's elite military force, sees itself as preparing the way for the Mahdi's return. This worldview shapes how Iran's regime approaches conflict with the United States. This isn't just about nuclear weapons or regional power. This is about fulfilling what they see as divine prophecy. And this same theology is being preached in American mosques, taught in American schools, and spread through American media platforms connected to Iranian regime influence. Fox News Digital conducted a comprehensive investigation analyzing hours of sermons, protest slogans, social media posts, and institutional messaging using large language models to identify patterns. They found clerics, community leaders, and media platforms in the United States explicitly framing tensions with Iran in apocalyptic terms rooted in Islamic end times theology. The precepts shaping Tehran's worldview are being preached on American soil by proxies for Iran's propaganda machine. Let's start with the Manassas Mosque in Northern Virginia, because what Fox News observed there is shocking. During a recent Friday sermon, the imam closed prayer asking Allah to destroy all the non-believers, kafirun or munafikun, before the arrival of Imam Mahdi. These Arabic terms mean non-believers and hypocrites. So he's praying for the destruction of non-believers as preparation for the Messiah's arrival. That's not calling for conversion or coexistence. That's calling for destruction. In the mosque's main prayer hall, there's a special table of honor featuring framed photographs of Ayatollah Khamenei embracing Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar and Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Both Sinwar and Nasrallah were killed by Israel in 2024 for orchestrating terrorist attacks. They're responsible for the deaths of thousands of civilians, and they're being honored in a Virginia mosque as heroes. When Fox News approached community leaders at the mosque after the service, They declined to speak on the record, but explained that the rhetoric about destroying non-believers and the photos of terrorist leaders are meant to challenge injustice before the Mahdi appears. Challenging injustice by celebrating terrorists and calling for the destruction of non-believers. That's the theological framework being promoted in a mosque in Northern Virginia. Last summer, the Manassas Mosque co-organized a White House protest with far-left groups including the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Answer Coalition, and Code Pink to support the Iranian regime. At that protest, one demonstrator wore a Palestinian keffiyeh over her face and carried a flag that read, "Labaik ya Mahdi" in Arabic, "At your service, O Mahdi." The flag also said in Farsi, Arabic, and English, "I dedicate every single of my steps to your reappearance." This person is publicly declaring dedication to the Mahdi's return at a protest supporting the Iranian regime outside the White House, on American soil, in the nation's capital. After war broke out between the U.S. and Iran on Friday night, Fox News Digital monitored pro-regime chats on messaging platforms like Telegram. They were filled with prayers awaiting the arrival of the Mahdi. "We need al-Mahdi. His return with Jesus will be the final win permanently," one message read. "The savior, the warrior, the dominator, Imam Mahdi will arrive," read another. These aren't isolated fringe believers. These are organized communities coordinating around this apocalyptic theology. Now let's talk about Dearborn, Michigan, because what's being preached there is even more explicit. Usama Abdul Ghani, imam at the Hadi Institute in Dearborn, posted a video warning congregants that the empire is now right outside the door of Iran, referring to U.S. forces. He reassured them, Iran has been waiting for the mother of all battles for 47 years, since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. He told Americans in his congregation not to fight for this empire. Think about what he's saying. An imam in Michigan is telling American Muslims not to support the United States in a conflict with Iran. He's positioning Iran as the righteous force waiting for this prophetic battle and America as the evil empire. In another lecture, Abdul Ghani urged congregants to engage in clarification jihad and convert Americans to Islam before Imam Mahdi returns. Convert Americans before the Mahdi returns. He's framing this as urgent spiritual warfare with apocalyptic stakes. Abdul Ghani also reassured his congregation that Iran would defeat U.S. forces. Iran has something for these guys. Don't be worried about Iran. Iran has been waiting for the mother of all battles for 47 years. They've been waiting for this. Iran is prepared. Don't worry about that. Iran's going to be able to handle its business. An imam in Michigan confidently predicting Iran will defeat the United States military in the mother of all battles. That's what's being preached to American Muslims by clerics aligned with the Iranian regime. The Hadi Institute has a publishing enterprise that states on its website that its staff deliver an unfiltered message in promoting an Islamic worldview in preparation of the Mahdi. Preparation of the Mahdi, this isn't incidental to their mission, this is their stated purpose. Fox News reached out to the Hadi Institute and Light of Guidance for comment about these statements. They didn't respond. Now let's talk about how this apocalyptic messaging is being taught to children, because this is where it gets truly disturbing. In late December, the Muslim Student Association Persian-speaking group of North America shared a video showing children coloring paper masks, swords, and shields labeled Ya Mahdi, Labaik. O Mahdi, come. The children staged mock attacks with their paper weapons amid Legos and glitter. They're teaching small children to role-play as soldiers for the Mahdi. A few years ago, a video from the Islamic Education Center of Houston went viral in Iran. It featured students saying they would be soldiers for Imam Mahdi, singing, I make an oath to be your martyr. Children, pledging to be martyrs for the Mahdi, in Houston, Texas. The center didn't respond to requests for comment. An academic told local media the video was metaphorical allegiance to a religious figure. But is it? When you're teaching children to make oaths of martyrdom and role-play military attacks in preparation for the Mahdi, that goes beyond metaphor. That's indoctrination into an apocalyptic ideology that glorifies violence and death. Now let's talk about the organizational infrastructure supporting this, because these aren't random, isolated mosques. This is a coordinated network. The National Union for Democracy in Iran, an advocacy group led by Iranian Americans opposing the theocratic regime, is releasing a report called The Ayatollah's Influence Network in the United States. Their researchers conclude that the Islamic Republic of Iran spreads Tehran's messaging through a network of institutions it supports in the United States. Andrew Galili, policy director for the organization, told Fox News, What we're seeing is years of deliberate investment by the Islamic Republic inside the United States. This is happening on American soil, and it's just another way in which the regime poses a direct threat to the United States, this time not with missiles, but through infiltration. The report alleges that a New York-based 501c3 nonprofit called the Alavi Foundation has built durable institution-based influence networks operating inside the United States through religious, educational, and nonprofit structures. The Alavi Foundation, headquartered on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, reported $58 million in assets in its latest IRS filing. $58 million. That's substantial resources to fund institutions, mosques, schools, and media platforms promoting Iranian regime ideology. Fox News reached out to the Alavi Foundation for comment about allegations that it promotes propaganda supporting the Iranian regime. They didn't respond. The report identifies mosques, K-12 schools, and community organizations in the U.S. that are producing messaging that mirrors Tehran's talking points almost word for word. This isn't organic community development. This is coordinated influence operation, funded and directed by Iranian regime interests. Now let's talk about the media dimension, because the apocalyptic messaging extends to pro-regime media platforms operating in the United States. Earlier this month, a media website called TMJ News Network published an article headlined "The Promise of Justice Amid Corruption." The article featured images of Jeffrey Epstein alongside references to the Mahdi. It stated, "Against this backdrop, the Mahdist movement represents a promise of justice. They're connecting the Epstein scandal to the arrival of the Mahdi. They're framing Western corruption as evidence that the apocalyptic Messiah is needed to establish justice." On the anniversary of Iran's 1979 revolution, the pro-regime Light of Guidance platform hosted an assistant imam named Hassan Salameh who invoked the Epstein list to denounce the Satanic West. He said, "The Islamic Republic is the system that is working to prepare the grounds for the saviors who will come side by side. Jesus, the son of Mary, and the Mahdi from the final prophet's line. This is the transitional government that will lead the fight to save us all." The Iranian regime as a transitional government preparing for the Mahdi and Jesus to save humanity. That's how they're framing the theocratic dictatorship that executes dissidents and oppresses women. This messaging is appearing on American media platforms, being consumed by American Muslims, shaping how American communities understand the conflict with Iran. Now let's talk about violence, because this theology isn't just abstract belief. It's inspiring actual attacks. A gunman just killed 3 people in Austin, Texas. He was wearing a sweater that said, "Property of Allah." Law enforcement found the flag of the Islamic Republic of Iran and photos of its leaders in his home. The FBI is investigating whether this was an act of terrorism. A man killed 3 Americans while wearing clothing declaring himself property of Allah with Iranian regime materials in his home. This is what happens when apocalyptic ideology spreads unchecked. Some believers don't wait for the Mahdi to arrive. They decide to act now, committing violence they see as preparation for the prophetic battle. Sarah Gorbani, a women's rights activist who fled Iran in 2010, told Fox News, "We're fighting an evil that the world doesn't truly comprehend in its belief that it has a divine mandate to usher in a day of apocalypse. Our brave people in Iran are fighting a tyranny that believes it is God's salvation for this earth, when in fact, it is a cruel and ungodly regime." She created a video documenting children allegedly killed by Iranian security forces in recent protests. She's challenging the narrative that the regime is fighting injustice by showing the actual injustice the regime commits. Now let's talk about what this means for the current conflict, because the apocalyptic theology isn't just background. It's actively shaping how regime supporters view the war. Days ago, Iran's state-run Islamic Republic news agency quoted Hezbollah Secretary General Sheikh Naim Qassem, claiming the regime is the government of Imam Mahdi, and its anti-U.S. resistance is the path to hastening his reappearance. They're explicitly framing resistance to America as accelerating the Mahdi's return. Fighting the U.S. isn't just geopolitical strategy, it's religious obligation to bring about the end times. Researchers at the National Contagion Research Institute analyzed regime narratives and found decentralized influence networks in the U.S. operationalize and amplify pro-regime messaging. These networks spread the idea that CIA and Mossad fomented protests against the regime. They promote conspiracy theories about American and Israeli manipulation. They frame any opposition to the regime as serving the Antichrist forces fighting against the Mahdi. This creates a closed ideological loop where criticism of Iran is reframed as opposition to divine prophecy. You're not just opposing a government, you're opposing the messianic mission to prepare for the Mahdi's return. Here's the bottom line and why this matters. Radical Shiite clerics on American soil are preaching that the war with Iran is prophetic showdown ushering in the Mahdi's arrival. Trump is cast as the Antichrist. Iran is cast as the righteous force preparing for apocalypse. This theology is being spread through mosques in Virginia, Michigan, and Texas, through schools teaching children to be Mahdi soldiers, through media platforms connecting Western corruption to the need for messianic intervention. A New York nonprofit with $58 million in assets allegedly funds influence networks promoting Iranian regime ideology across American institutions. Children are being taught to pledge martyrdom. Congregations are being told not to support America against Iran. Communities are celebrating terrorist leaders as heroes preparing for the Mahdi. An Austin shooter killed 3 people wearing property of Allah with Iranian regime materials at home. This theology inspires violence. Secretary of State Rubio is right. Iran's decisions are governed by pure theology, and that theology is being actively promoted on American soil by regime proxies. After Ayatollah Khamenei was killed in Operation Epic Fury, pro-regime Telegram chats filled with prayers for the Mahdi's arrival. They see this as prophecy unfolding. We're not just fighting a regime, we're fighting an apocalyptic ideology that views conflict with America as divine mandate. And that ideology has established deep roots in American communities through decades of deliberate investment. The mosques, the schools, the media platforms, the children singing about martyrdom, the imams predicting Iran will win, the mother of all battles, the prayers for destroying nonbelievers before the Mahdi arrives. This is happening in America, right now, and it's being funded, organized, and amplified by networks connected to the Iranian regime. This isn't about religious freedom. This is about foreign influence operations using religious institutions to spread apocalyptic ideology that views America as evil empire to be defeated in prophetic warfare. The investigation is complete. The evidence is documented. The threat is real. Radical clerics are preaching apocalypse on American soil, and they believe the war with Iran is the beginning of the end times.